Hey guys, welcome to TNJ Radio. We have a great show for you today. We are talking to Dave Rubin, who is the host of the Rubin Report, which can be found on Rumble and YouTube if he hasn't been kicked off yet. He recently wrote a book called Don't Burn This Country, Surviving and Thriving in Our Woke Dystopia. I'm pretty sure there's some of our controversy. It'll be going on in our conversation. And today's world, we've seen a polarization of everything from the teaching of critical race theory in schools, the parental rights and education bill, falsely dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill, and of course, possible overturning of Roe v. Wade. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Dave on. How are you, Dave?
William, it's good to be with you. You know, I don't know what time it is. I could be kicked off YouTube at any moment right now. I could take you down with me, man.
Well, we don't want to do that, but you know, let's get right into it. We'll keep our fingers crossed and see how long we'll be able to keep this video up.
Let's roll.
Growing up in the 80s and 90s in New York, it's probably been a completely different time than now. Tell me about how that was.
Yeah, I'm a true New Yorker. I was born in June of '76 in Brooklyn, New York, when it was old school Brooklyn, which was a huge melting pot that so many people from every walk of life had come to make a better life for themselves. You know, there were Irish immigrants there and Jewish families and Italians and blacks and Hispanics, and everybody kind of got along or didn't get along, but it all sort of worked. It was what we would call the gestalt of New York, that there were all of these different people with different traditions and foods and way of speaking and music and all of this stuff. And it all sort of existed there in a very, very magical way. And you could argue actually that it's really what America is all about more than anything else, that so many people from so many different walks of life could live in this little borough of New York City and not be at war with each other. You know, there would be occasional flare-ups of different little things that would happen, but it was a pretty extraordinary place. I was there for a couple years, but my formative years, really kindergarten through high school, we grew up in Long Island, which was the ultimate dream. My parents, the dream of anyone from a sort of New York perspective is that you grow up either in New York City or in the suburbs, and the goal, or New York City or the boroughs, and the goal, of course, is to move to the suburbs, and you get the house, and you get the fence and the backyard, and it's a little bit safer, and you got a playground and all that stuff. And that's what my parents were able to do. My dad spent 40 plus years of his life commuting on the Long Island Railroad, 2 hours, an hour each way, every day, 5 days a week, which I compiled the numbers for my book. I mean, the guy spent about 2.5 years of his life on a train so that he could go to work, so that he could provide us a pretty good life. And that's what me and my brother, who's a couple of years younger, and my sister, who's about 9 years younger, that's what we got. And now they both have their own families and live in the suburbs themselves. And it was a pretty good childhood, pretty stable and solid. And, there was always food on the table. My mom raised us all, so she was a housewife, and then made sure to send us off with breakfast and be home when we got home from school. My dad was working every day. Later, when my sister finally was old enough to take care of herself, my mom didn't have to be there all the time. My mom went back and became a nursery school teacher. So our family was very much what I think America is all about. And then I spent most of my years after that. I went to SUNY College, State University of New York at Binghamton, which is a pretty good state school. My dad said, hey, if you want to go to a private school, you're paying. But if you want to go to a state school, we'll foot the bill. So I made, I think, the right decision on that one. Didn't get into crazy debt. And then I lived in New York City for about 12 or so years. I was in New York City during 9/11, which obviously was horrific, but imprinted on me in many, many ways. And moved out to LA in 2013, and then moved to the free state of Florida just this past year at the end of 2021. And that's where I'm at the moment, and very happily at, I should add.
Absolutely. Go Florida. Now, in the subtitle of your book, you had said surviving and thriving in our woke dystopia. Some people may have a different outlook on whenever that term is used. What do you mean by woke?
It's a great question, and it's important to define things. I try to do that on my show so that, people that hear one word, you're right. A certain set of people hear the word woke, they go, yes, I am woke. And a certain people go, you hear the word woke and you go, boy, the wokes are the crazy people. So it is important to determine. I would say that the woke from the way that I use the term, the way that I would say most people who are trying to understand this sort of new collectivist, oddly racial, gender-obsessed movement are talking about it, are the people that think that your immutable characteristics are the most important thing about you. So, for example, William, you and I have been talking for 4 minutes or so. Obviously, you guys had reached out to my team and said you'd love to have me on the show. I did a cursory look at what you guys do, but I don't know a tremendous amount about you, to be totally honest, other than I thought you're doing a good show. I looked and I said, okay, I'd love to talk to the guy. But the idea that I would ever look at you and go, okay, here is a black man, he must think this, that, or the other thing, that your identity, or if I was to look at a Latino woman or a lesbian or whatever it might be, that you could look at someone's immutable characteristics and that collectivist vision of who that person is the totality of who they are. And then, of course, what that does is put people in this sort of racial or gender-based hierarchy so that, you know, if you're a black, disabled lesbian, you're very high up on this thing. If you're a straight white man, of course, you're at the bottom of this thing, and so on and so forth. So when I talk about woke, I'm talking about people who are, in essence, I would argue, quite anti-human, actually. They think they're doing good in that they're looking out for the oppressed or the people that they perceive to be oppressed. But we all are individuals. We all are individuals. You don't want to be judged just because of the color of your skin, the same way I don't want to be judged just because of the color of my skin. So what we're finding really right now is, I would say it's people who believe in individualism, that you are the sum totality of your beliefs and actions, and then you can create a world, hopefully a family and a community bottom up from that. Or you believe in collectivism, that we all are just sort of things that exist, that are cogs in a machine that is much bigger than us, and we really don't deserve that much. It's just sort of what we're handed is what we should get. And our work ethic and our education and all of the things that make us the hopefully great things that are within us, they don't really matter that much, because if you're black, you should get this. If you're gay, you should get that. And we will have equity rather than equality, which are two very separate things.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you had mentioned that I thought was key going on is that on one side of the political spectrum, typically they will pick people based off of their gender, by their race, by their sex, or, you know, whatever it would be. We've seen it with the Supreme Court nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson simply for being a black woman. Now,
oh, look at you. I guess you're a biologist.
I sure am. School of you know, the fake knocks. But along the way, though, and you had made some comments, I believe yesterday, in regards to the new White House press secretary that seems like a lot of people are kind of coming against you about, but you said that, in quote, you know, let me know if I have it wrong, that she is, all we pretty much know about her is that she's a black lesbo. Was that right?
I did say that. You know, when I do my show, I'm completely unscripted and I just kind of say what comes to my mind. I mean, the truth is she's black. We know that. And she's a lesbian. So I did say lesbo, which, okay, so be it. You know, someone can say what they want about gay people too. I think you're still allowed to joke about people. But in essence, what I was saying, as Jen Psaki was introducing her, as I think she called her sister in truth or something like that. And it's like, man, Jen Psaki wouldn't know the truth if it smashed her in the face, if it fell on her head. She wouldn't know what is true. The woman cannot say anything true. It's impossible. You ask her favorite color, she would say 6. I mean, the woman is incapable of telling the truth. But now she's bringing in this girl that I don't know of her qualifications, but it's very clear that her identity is what drove the hiring, because the first thing that Psaki said was, here she is black and she is lesbian. Now, of course, a black lesbian could be very qualified to be a White House press secretary or anything else. But that should not be the main reason that you hire. Just the same way would be, William, if you had to have heart surgery, right, would you ever say to the doctor, if you go to the hospital, it's like, man, my heart's about to explode, and they're like, we got 4 doctors here. Would you say, okay, I want the best one, or give me the best black lesbian? No one would say that. You would want the best doctor. You would not care about their gender or skin color or sexuality or any of those things. So they've played a very twisted trick with us. So yes, I made a little silly reference to lesbos. I mean, I don't think anyone really cares. There's always a set of people that are just looking to get angry about something. And it's like, she's a lesbian. What do you want me to do? She's married to Suzanne Malveaux. She's also a lesbian. Lesbians like other chicks. I read it somewhere.
I think they do. And so talking about, one of your chapters, you had talked about the system of structural dependency.
Well, the main point of the chapter is that everyone is walking around and not knowing what they're talking about, right? So we all wake up, and everyone does this, and I'm even guilty of this sometimes. You wake up and then you see what's going on in the world, and the Iran nuclear deal happened, and suddenly everyone's freaking out about the Iran nuclear deal, and suddenly people who could never point to Iran on a map, suddenly they know everything about centrifuges, halfway across the world. Any given day you wake up, suddenly everyone's a constitutional scholar when it comes to Roe v. Wade. Everyone's a constitutional scholar when it comes to the Green New Deal or the Paris Climate Accords. That we've set up so many systems that are not doing the things that they are supposed to be doing. An education, a basic education, and one of my, when it was more easy for me to say I was a liberal, an old school liberal, a classical liberal, which is what my first book is all about. One of the reasons that I could fall back on that was because I believed that there was a role for the government when it came to public education. I don't know that there is anymore. I think over the last 2 or 3 years, as we have seen this thing devolve, as we have seen the activists take over for real teachers, as we have seen schools focus more on critical race theory and gender nonsense and race stuff, as opposed to, hey, maybe teaching kids that 2 + 2 is 4. Maybe teaching kids an honest assessment of American history, which, by the way, would include, obviously, talking about racism and slavery, which, of course, I learned about at a public school, and virtually every school does learn about, but not just endlessly focusing on a certain set of issues that are designed to make children unaware of reality, their own personal biological reality, or the reality of the country and the history of the country. So I think, and really what the purpose of the book is and why the chapter's in there, is we have to start disassociating from some of these things. They've infected an awful lot, but you don't need these things. They want you to think you need these things, and I don't think that you do.
Right. And you know what? Some of the things that you had brought up, I forgot all about the Paris Climate Accords. The 24-hour news cycle is constantly feeding us different things that we should be happy and mostly things that we should be mad about. There were people for years, they weren't even thinking about Roe v. Wade, and all of a sudden this leak happens and everyone's mad about it. But what do you think about people that are protesting at the justices' houses?
Yeah, look, first off, as an American, you have a right to protest for sure. And as long as you do it peacefully and within the confines of the law, then it's okay. From what I understand, there's a little bit of a gray area when it comes to protesting at people's houses, because it can leak into other parts of the law that are not connected to protest. If you're blocking roads and access to other people's homes. And, there's also this sort of, we have a social contract that I think goes beyond the law specifically. And if we just start saying, okay, if someone does something political or socially or culturally that I don't like, that we can now start leaking their address and showing up to their houses and intimidating them and their spouses and their children and all of those things, man, this never ends, because you could just as easily start protesting at the protesters' houses. And also, what I think is even more interesting than that is that if we had the reverse version of this, where right now, as we speak, because as we're speaking right now, there are lefty protesters outside of the conservative-leaning Supreme Court justices' houses, and the media is basically showing it and kind of applauding it. And yes, it's the people doing, protesting and within their right. Okay, fine. But now let's do the reverse of it. Let's say this was a bunch of right-wing protesters protesting outside of Sonia Sotomayor's house. You know what they'd be saying. They'd be saying these are insurrectionists, these are racists, the Republicans have to condemn it, blah, blah, blah. So what I'm usually focused on is the asymmetry related to all of these things, that we don't honestly assess these things equally from a political level. We're constantly going, oh, Democrats and lefties are sort of good, so they're allowed to do whatever they want. And of course, Republicans and conservatives are bad, and they should be punished and jailed and silenced and canceled.
And I know that you covered this in your previous book, but I remember Reagan had said, I didn't leave the Democrat Party left me. What was the kind of the turning point from you identifying as a liberal to, I guess you sit in this libertarian type.
Well, look, I don't mind being called a conservative. I really don't. I would say that a conservative right now, there's a pretty wide swath of what a conservative is. So I'm probably on the more libertarian side of conservatism, meaning that I'm always trying to max out individual freedom and limited government. Now, there are more traditional religious conservatives who believe that the government should be more involved, say, in social issues and certain things. Now, but I would say we're roughly on the same side because we're all trying to fight the collectivists and the communists, really, is what they are, that have basically overtaken the entire Democratic Party. So I don't mind being called a conservative. And by the way, if a lot of the people that don't like me will always call me a conservative, and it's like, all right, you can call me a conservative, but that shows that the conservatives are a pretty freaking wide tent. Okay, because I wrote another book, the first book that you just mentioned, Don't Burn This Book, which was all about defending liberalism, true liberalism, which has nothing to do with the modern Democratic Party. So in that book, I go into a couple stories related to how I woke up and why I woke up. The most famous one, of course, is my interaction with Larry Elder, conservative radio talk show host from years ago, who I'm sure you're familiar with. So I won't repeat that one. I'll give you the other one of the other three that I tell in that book. I was on air years ago at the Young Turks, which is a left-wing YouTube channel, and that's where I was working there at the time. And we were playing a clip of Fox News and criticizing the clip. And that particular night, a guy by the name of David Webb was guest hosting for Sean Hannity. And David Webb happens to be a black conservative. And I'm sitting at the panel with 3 or 4 other people at the desk, and they're all calling him an Uncle Tom and a sellout and all of these things. This is what they're calling David Webb. And what they didn't know is that David Webb was and is a good friend of mine. I had worked at Sirius XM years before, where he's a radio host. He still is to this day. And we had met in the hallway one day, and we kind of struck up a conversation. And he knew I was a lefty, and I knew he was on the right. But he said, hey, why don't you come on my show once a week? We'll debate the topics. We started doing that, and then we'd go downstairs to Del Frisco's. We'd have a steak and some whiskey after, and we've become lifelong friends since then. And so here I am now sitting with these supposed tolerant, open-minded, diverse lefties, and they see this black man who's saying things that they don't like, and they feel that that gives them the leash to say whatever they want about him, not criticize the ideas, but criticize him as a man. He's a sellout. He's an Uncle Tom. They said other things that I need not repeat. And because I knew David, and he wasn't just a guy in a box, but this was a friend of mine who I know believes what he says, has taken positions that are not easy to take as a conservative, and they're certainly not easy to take as a black conservative because of people like them. I thought, man, these are the bigots, actually. It was so obvious to me. I mean, I literally remember sitting there looking around thinking, man, you guys are the racists. You think that this guy, that he has to think what you want him to think, and if he doesn't, he's a sellout to his own race. You think that because of the color of his skin, he has to vote a certain way. It's disgusting, actually. And that was one of several events that kind of woke me up to all of the current lunacy that we see everywhere now.
I believe you have dealt with all of that.
I believe it.
It's always, fun though, because, when you're able to give people facts and kind of educate people, you find out that they don't listen.
They often don't listen, and it's work to get them to listen. And sometimes it just ain't going to work. And sometimes you have to, leave a couple crumbs out and hope that they'll find their way.
Absolutely. Now, with what's going on in regards to information, you had talked a little bit about, capitalism versus socialism. And a lot of people would say that, the capitalists are the big greedy guys who are just trying to control everything and have their way. But it seems like that is happening, but it just seems to be on one side. I mean, how do you end up reconciling that?
Yeah, well, look, as many people have pointed out, capitalism is the best of sort of all flawed systems. Humans are flawed. So the idea that we can create this perfect system for us all to behave in is a sort of pipe dream. But capitalism is pretty damn good. The idea that you basically create the conditions without a lot of government coercion for people to use their skill and their work ethic and their talents to have the free exchange of goods and services. If you're good at something and you can build something or create something, of value that someone else might be interested in. They can trade either their skills or services or money, the monetary value, that they can trade these things voluntarily without coercion. That is by far the best system. Now, that isn't to say that there aren't greedy capitalists. Are there greedy capitalists? Of course. Are there people that go in that are ruthless business people that don't care if they acquire a company and then lay off people that have been working there for 30 years and crush people? And all? Of course that exists. That is part of the human condition. But you cannot eliminate the human condition, except communists often try to do it, which is why they have to kill so many people to get to their utopia. That's why every time communism is tried, well, first off, the socialists and communists will say, well, it's never been tried properly. But the point is, because every time they try it, they got to kill an awful lot of people, and then a lot of people end up turning against it. Capitalism is the best open system to allow people to flourish. It really is as simple as that. There's nothing even close to it. Again, that does not mean that some bad things aren't going to happen within the system, but I think what you can hope for, at least in a capitalist system, is that if you see bad things happening, if you see that, oh my God, this whole industry is filled with greedy people and not making good products, and these aren't safe things, or whatever it might be, you can go create it on your own. And that is not easy. That is not easy. Of course it's not easy. It's not easy to create a widget. It's not easy to create a new internet, but you have an opportunity to do it. And within that opportunity is your chance to maximize what you are as a human being. And that's what capitalism is all about.
Yeah, and absolutely. And some of the things that I thought were interesting in your book, and I'm not going to give it all away, but just certain things that you did even along the way in your journey to get where you are. I'm sitting there thinking, like, that is crazy.
Well, I'll tell you real quick that, when I created Locals, locals.com, it was because I saw a problem with the internet years ago. There was a free speech problem. There was a problem with creators not owning their content, not being able to communicate with their audience, being totally beholden to all these algorithms and all this stuff. And I was like, why doesn't someone build it? And I knew a lot of people in tech, and I knew a lot of people with money, and I kept saying to people, why doesn't someone build it? Why doesn't someone? And everyone kind of be like, I don't know, it's hard to build things. Or some people would be like, why don't you build it? And then one day I basically pulled a Homer Simpson, and I was like, well, I guess I'm a guy like me. And I started building it.
Right, absolutely. And it's so funny. I was looking into Locals. Another YouTuber, the lead attorney, was talking about going over to it. And I was sitting there thinking, this looks like a pretty good thing. And then I'm reading your book and I'm like, wow, there's the guy. Started.
I just felt that somebody should do something. And that's, again, that goes back to capitalism. I thought, all right, there is a hole in the market. Why don't I try to do something? And I worked very hard for a couple of years to build something. We built something good. And, we've subsequently merged with Rumble, and they're up to some good stuff. And hopefully we can fight some of this big tech stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of big tech, if you haven't been under a rock, anyone knows that right now Elon Musk is out there fighting against a lot of big tech through being big tech at the same time. How do you think that's going to end up turning out?
Well, I think it's going to turn out well for the most part. And I think that him getting involved already is a win no matter what happens here. The idea that one guy said, hey, I'm going to put my butt on the line and get involved in the free speech fight because I think it's right. Like, that's pretty freaking impressive right there. This guy could do whatever he wants. He could literally right now just pick up and move to Mars. He could do it. He could build the rocket ship and get his family off this pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan said, and go to another planet if he so chose and didn't want to deal with our nonsense anymore here on Earth. But instead he said, hey, I'm going to take $44 billion and I'm going to not only take the $44 billion and I'm going to buy the thing, but I'm also going to make myself the interim CEO. I'm going to let the entire machine run hit pieces on me. I'm going to let all these people attack me. I'm going to be called racist, which is what the New York Times basically called him a couple of days ago, and all the rest of the stuff. And I'm going to do it because I think that the ability for us to communicate freely on these platforms is important. So right now, I'm very hopeful what's going on. Just like 10 minutes before we started this, he officially said that he wants Trump back on the platform and that he'd be welcome back on. That'll create other problems down the road, because if you let Trump back on Twitter, well, now if Apple doesn't want Trump on, Apple could potentially stop Twitter from being on the App Store. So there's a lot of problems. But hey, I'll take the world's greatest innovator on our side of this and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another thing that you actually mentioned in your book was about being a hero. and not just a comrade? What is a hero for you?
Well, the idea of the chapter is that you should be player one in your life. That when you watch Star Wars, when you watch Lord of the Rings, when you watch The Matrix, or whatever movie you like, I'm a sci-fi guy, so that's where my stories go, that you want to be the main guy. Why not be Luke? Why not be Neo? Why not be Frodo? Now, that's not to say that some of the other guys aren't important, right? Of course, Morpheus is important, and of course, Han Solo is important, and I can't remember any of the other hobbits' names, but they're important too. Connor, give me a hobbit's name. Give me a name of a hobbit. Samwise, he was important too. I got a hobbit guy over. Here's my hobbit expert. I always keep a hobbit guy with me. But the point is that you should be on an adventure in this life, that you got one shot, as far as I know, while you're here. And you may as well do something that you think is worth doing. You may as well be someone that, you know, we've all been this to a party where someone walks in the room and you look at the guy or the girl and you can just tell they're living their best life. Something good is going on. They're doing something valuable. A lot of people look at Elon Musk right now and they go, man, he became the richest dude in the world. He's doing all this cool stuff. He's sending Teslas to space. He's going to Mars. It's like, you got a chance to do that. So why not do that instead of being a comrade? Meaning instead of just being another foot soldier, a pawn in someone else's movie, why not be the main driver in your movie? You got a chance to do it. And I can tell you that it comes with slings and arrows, and it's not a guarantee for success. You know, in movies, at the end, the good guy seemingly always wins. I don't know that that's exactly how life works, but why not find out, right? Like, why not take the chance and see? And I suspect that almost without fail, if you set your goal on something, you see that thing in the distance. I want to be a great podcaster. I want to be an NBA player. I want to be a plumber, whatever it might be. Maybe you don't get to that thing, right? So I'm 45. I have a torn ACL in my knee. Man, I would have loved to play in the NBA. I love basketball. I still got some skills. I got a pretty good three-point shot. I got a finger roll. I can still move out there a little bit for what I'm left with a bad knee. But I was never going to be an NBA player. I'm 5'11". That was never going to happen, right? But I still play basketball all the time. I've met a couple NBA players who I've played horse with. That's pretty cool. But the point is that what I really realized was, okay, I'm not going to be an NBA player, but I like talking, I like communicating, I like politics. And I started going for something. And now I got roughly something related to exactly what I wanted. And that's pretty awesome.
All right. So at the end of the day, what are some of the most important reasons why people should get your book?
Because it's a tool guide. It's a how-to. I almost put how-to in the subtitle, and then I thought it was like a little too gimmicky or something. But, you know, the reason that the subtitle says surviving and thriving is that a lot of us have just survived over the last couple of years, right? We just kind of skated by. They locked us down. We did it. They told us we can't go to work. We did it. They said, don't see grandma on Thanksgiving. We did it. We survived, but did we really thrive? Did we do everything we were supposed to in these last couple of years? And I think most of us, and I could probably include myself to a degree, although I've done a lot in these last couple of years to fight it, we probably should have done more. We probably should have done more. And the book really is a toolkit to how you can survive, perhaps by not going into debt, going to a school where you're going to learn nonsense and get a useless degree. By perhaps not living in a city that is going to tax you endlessly to have bad, big government policies that are going to bring more crime and homelessness. There's a series of things that you can do. And there are a bunch of things that I incorporated into my own life that have fortunately paved a nice path for me.
Okay, great. So, Dave, you know, what we like to do is just to kind of also see another side to our guests. So just a quick lightning round, whatever one comes up as your answer first, you know, pick. Okay, you ready?
Let's roll.
All right. Ice cream, vanilla or chocolate?
Oh, I can't select my own. I got to go with your two choices. So I can't go with the cookies and cream. I'm going to go with chocolate.
This is dystopian a little. You know. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars, but I wish I could say more things. Continue.
Ron Paul or Rand Paul?
Ooh, I'm going to say Rand because of where we're at in society right now, I think he can really still affect things.
Okay. LeBron or Jordan?
Oh, Jordan. That's not even close.
Okay, my man. N64 or PS4?
Ooh, that's good. I wish I could say Sega Genesis, but playing by the rules you have set out here, I'm going to say PS4.
Sega Genesis would have been my pick also. So yeah, with that, appreciate you coming on.
William, it was a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks a lot.